like that. Okay, whatever. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. Yedua. Shemasiris when the Hanukkah, Bisman Gezeres Yovan, and then the rest of the Jewish people, many of the Jewish people joined in with them and fought the battle. Every Jew, and that's one of the chidushim of the Alter Rebbe. And nowhere does it say this in the story in the Megillah. But the Alter Rebbe points out, and it's also not in Chazal, but the Alter Rebbe points out that if the Yidden had been meimir datam chos v'sholem, if they had denied their Yiddishkeit and switched to whatever religion it happened to be in the time, by the Persians, so then they would have been spared the death penalty. And evidently no one did that. And that's one of the miracles of Purim. Right? So that was B'chol Yisrael. Now, what does that mean? Therefore, we can explain what it says in the Maimer from the Medrash. And if you recall, we brought both a Medrash and the Zohar to tell us that there's a Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation. The Medrash, meaning it's in Nigla and in Pnimis Torah. And the Medrash was the Medrash that talked about Mordechai. That Mordechai was equal in his generation like Moshe in his generation. So of course the question obviously arises, but wait a minute, I'll be the Zohar, there's Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation, so why is the Medrash specifying Mordechai? Rabbi Akiva Mastama, Rabbi Akiva Badara, Hayaka Moshe Badara, the Rambam Badara, the Rambam's Ortsite today. Rambam Badara, Hayaka Moshe Badara. So why Dafka? Obviously, the Gemara isn't going to mention the Rambam, but why Dafka Mordechai? The Hagam, that even though these Pashtus of the Moshe who beholder shaykh to every generation, which is what the Zohar says, Mikol Mokim Isa b'Medrash, the Medrash says Shem Mordechai Dafka Shokol B'Dare Moshe B'Dare, that is specifically Mordechai who was like Moshe. And why is that? Well, because of what we just said, right? Mordechai is the most obvious expression of Raya Mehemna relative to the Indian of Mesiras Nefesh, right? And and we'll see the Rebbe is about to say that, right? Now it's also, but it is interesting what the Rebbe says. V'yesh leimer shehamaylis the Mordechai Yudi hu shua Raya Mehemna begilui, in a revealed way shall kol Yisrael shebedar. He was the revealed Raya Mehemna of all of Yisrael in his generation. Now, it does happen to be interesting that there were people who disagreed with Mordechai. It says that he was, what's the Lashon? Al Rov. It says that there's a pasuk in the Megillah that talks about the fact that he was loved by the majority of the people in the generation. It does not say what call. It says the majority. Why? Well, there were people in the Anshe Knesset Daily Dafka who disagreed with Mordechai and were very upset that Mordechai didn't come back to Eretz Yisrael with them. Ezra and Nehemiah were already in Eretz Yisrael at the time of the story of Purim, which is really astounding. But you read the story, you would never know that. They're in Eretz Yisrael.
How is that possible if it was Esther's son who sent them back? No, it was Daryavish.
No, he's the one who gave them the okay to build the Beis Hamikdash.
So that was already after.
Right, but evidently they'd already gone back. Yeah, because they're not there.
So this was already towards the end of the Shidim Shana.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Right, they don't seem to be there, right? In the whole story, they're not there. Evidently, they're in Eretz Yisrael. I could be wrong with that, but as far as I understand, they're already in Eretz Yisrael. And they were not happy with Mordechai that he had stayed there and remained involved in the politics of Achashverosh and his court. So there were people who disagreed with Mordechai, though it's pretty clear from the story that Mordechai is the one that galvanized the Jewish people to do what they did. So he was shaykh to Rov. Okay, please pass that Bible. The thank you. So let's look up the pasuk. It's right there. See, not a bell curve. V'rotzui l'roiv echav. Last pasuk in the middle. And he was desirable. Rotzui l'roiv echav. Which is really interesting. It doesn't say l'kol echav.
Majority of his colleagues.
The majority of his brothers, the Jewish people, which is really interesting, right? It was begilui. So the Rebbe explains that it's explained in other places. It's not here. When we say begilui, so gilui means that in Tanya, so the Alter Rebbe says that Or Mamale comes into Gilui in Eilam Hazeh. What does it mean it comes into Gilui? You see Or Mamale when you look around in Eilam Hazeh, you don't see Or Mamale. So what does it mean it's Begilui? It's not Begilui, it's Behelim. Right? There's Or Mamale, but what does that mean? That means that in truth, Begilui, the source of the existence of everything in Eilam Hazeh is Or Mamale. And it's not begilui to the extent that you can see it. It's begilui to the extent that that's the truth of reality. The truth of reality is that everything in Eilam Hazeh is dependent on Or Mamale. And so the Alter Rebbe says that as opposed to Sovev, which is not begilui here, why? Well, because it's not the most obvious source of reality in Eilam Hazeh. But begilui, there's Or Mamale. That means if you understand reality, so then you understand that it's all Or Mamale. It's not begilui to the extent that you can see it. So too, this gilui, also Moshe Rabbeinu had his opponents. But it's pretty clear that Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader of the generation. That's absolutely begilui, right? And everything that was happening in the generation was a function of Moshe Rabbeinu. So too, so too Mordechai in his generation. That everything was happening as a result of him, and that's begilui mitzad the emes of the situation. It might be he had his opponents. Now the Rebbe is going to say the same thing about the Frierdiker Rebbe right now. Now, obviously, there were people who weren't Chassidim of the Frierdiker Rebbe, right? But Dugmas Meisha Raya Mehemna Shehim Shich Das L'Kol Yisrael Shebeder, just like Meisha, who was the Raya Mehemna. And what did Meisha do? Well, we said that what does Meisha Rabbeinu do? Meisha Rabbeinu, the Raya Mehemna, is Mamshich Das, connects the Jewish people to the etzem of their neshama, which brings emuna into their conscious reality. So Elokus is part of their conscious reality, and they relate to everything within the context of their connection to the Eibishter. So they see the Eibishter and everything. One of the most obvious and powerful expressions of that is the notion of Hashgacha Pratis, as the Baal Shem Tov explains. Right? That everything's Hashgacha Pratis, and the Jew is aware of that and sees that and relates to it, and relates to the fact that the green light that he just hit in traffic was because the Eibishter wanted him to, and he says thank you to the Eibishter. He's connected in a very powerful way. Kemuvan gam mizeh shedera Meisha, which is understood also from this, that the generation of Meisha, kol anshe dera, nikra dordeya. They're dordeya, that's what they're called. Chazal refers to that generation as dordeya, a dor of das. Why? Because they were shaykh to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu was mamshich das into the whole generation. And that's begilui. Now that's mamish as begilui as you can get. Ella, sheb'Moshe hayagilu inyan zeh, but in Moshe, this revelation, shurayim mehemna, the whole Yisrael, how is that expressed? Well, like we saw earlier in Vav yesterday. Ayadei shimshich das l'kol anshe der. When there's no need for Mesiras Nefesh, so the expression of the Muna being from the Rai Mehemna, bringing us to a state where the source of our Muna is our essential connection to the Eibishter, is Das. And we explained why. Because Mazli Chazi is a Makif. And so even though there's a level of Muna there, obviously, but it might be that it doesn't express itself in conscious me, because it's not conscious me, it's superconscious me. Whereas Etzem is beyond superconscious and conscious. It's the source of conscious, it's the source of superconscious, it's the essence of both. And therefore, if that level of Emunah is touched, if that level is revealed, so then that affects my conscious reality. And again, what does that mean? That means a person lives Elokus, he thinks about Elokus, he talks about Elokus. That's the bringing Emunah into Das. And that's Moshe. Uba Mordechai. But of course we know Mordechai wasn't Das, it was Mesiras Nefesh. But Mordechai yagilu inyan zel yadei shegila kayach Mesiras Nefesh b'chol anshe dera. Moshe Rabbeinu connected us to Etzem and Neshama and brought about a revelation of Das, so the whole generation is called Dardeya. Mordechai connected the Jewish people to Etzem and Neshama, to the essence of their soul, and therefore the Yidden were Mesiras Nefesh. Now they weren't Mesiras Nefesh. V'yesh leimer. That's Pshat. Mordechai B'dera was Moshe B'dera. He's paskening. Based on this, he establishes the din also regarding himself. It's revealed in the reality in the world, even though it might not necessarily be accepted by everybody in the world. Right now, it is true that in Russia in those days, we've talked about this, so that perhaps one of the greatest compliments, if not the greatest compliment of the Frierdiker Rebbe, is that a Frum Jew in Russia was called a Schneesenist. Right? But regardless of whether they were Lubavitcher or not, no one knew what a Lubavitcher is. It's Schneesenist. If you kept Shabbos, you were called a Schneesenist, because who was it that was called a doch? Now it's a doch without an apostrophe, right? Doch. Okay, so let's see what they're. So how do you explain that that's what it says in Pirkei Avos? Al pi divrei HaMishnah. The Mishnah says later on in Pirkei Avos, shenifroim mimenu midate shalei midate, that payment is extracted ushaloi knowledge. Shalach that after establishes right. He's aware dinay shel chaverei, the idea about another person, that's midate, he willfully did that. Pesek, so then he's pesek din regarding, he's not aware of the fact that by being pesek din, a negative din on, if Reuven is pesek a negative din on Shimon, then Reuven has brought that din onto himself. Shaloi midate. He's not aware of that. He's aware of what he's doing for Shimon. It's explained in the Mefarshim that the Malachim can have no control over the Jewish people, but when is it that the Malachim can, so to speak, punish? When a person has expressed something negative about someone else, so then the Malachim are given reshus to give that person that which he thought of relative to that other person. So therefore, what's first? First, there's the din, that Reuven relates to Shimon, b'midas adin, negatively. That makes a cheshbon for Reuven. That brings about the cheshbon for Reuven, that the accounting that Reuven is now shaykh to the same thing. So first there's the din, and only after the din is there the cheshbon. Pesach din latzma shalei midate, kevin shall be din, ze oisim cheshbon. By virtue of the din, this one makes a cheshbon b'negei l'matzavehu, relative to his own matzav. That's explained. It says there, footnote, oh, okay. So the fact that the Alter Rebbe is Pesach din, not in a negative way, on Mordechai, so that makes the cheshbon that it's relevant to him.
Is this true of all the rabbis or just the Frierdiker Rebbe, since he's the one who said it?
That's an interesting question. I mean, you would assume that by virtue of the fact, simple pshat. I mean, we don't know what goes on barumo shel right? But in simple pshat, what did the Rebbe just do? The Rebbe just paskin the din by the Frierdiker Rebbe. So what does that mean? So just paskin din about him. Assume that's how it works. Right? I mean, I'd have no issue with the Rebbe being Raya Mehemna's generation, so that's not a. There have been few generations that had such a clear leader of a generation like our generation. Meaning, even the people who were the biggest opponents of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in public.
Right, I still understand the impact.
Well, they also, Rabbi Groner told me this. I remember sitting with Rabbi Groner. I told you this story. I was sitting with Rabbi Groner's office, and he had a fax machine in the room behind him. And in those days, it was a roll. Right? It was a roll. It wasn't plain paper fax. It was a roll of this horrible waxy paper that, if it touched your hands and somehow you licked your fingers, it was the most bitter taste you've ever experienced in your life. No, you'd be working with it, and then you'd have something, you moved, you had a hair in your mouth, you moved it. It's unbelievable, this stuff. You had to wash your hands after you touched it. So So in the back, behind him, there was all that fax machine noise, and then there'll be another fax, and we're talking, and you don't even notice it after a while because it's just going. It's nonstop. There'll be one, and then immediately as that one stops, you'll and it's just going. And at one point, he'd say, just 1 minute, I have to change the role. Meaning he had like a cheshbon, right? And he'd get up and he'd change the role. So I remember I was sitting with him in this app. I said, does this just go on all day? So he said, yeah. This is Tafshin and Aleph. Before the Rebbe got sick, right? So he said, yeah, well, it's all day. But that was just move on my love, that brilliant generation. It was really, it's interesting. I mean, we take it for granted. That's just who the Rebbe is, but that's who all the Rebbeim were. But in our generation, it was absolutely clear that that's who the Rebbe was. I remember talking to a Ger Chassid. His son was a student of mine. His son became a Lubavitcher, so his son was a student of mine. He's a Ger Chassid from New York, and we were schmoozing. So I said, well, what do you think about Moti becoming a Lubavitcher? I mean, you're from a Ger family. They were Ger for a number of generations, his family. He said, look, Baruch Hashem, he's from, and I'll tell you the truth, I have a Rebbe, but your Rebbe is the Rebbe of the Rebbes, and I don't have any problem. Ger Chassid said that, your Rebbe is the Rebbe of the Rebbes. I mean, when the Rebbes need something, they go to your Rebbe. That's what he meant, because the Ger Rebbe came to the Rebbe. Now, the Rebbe didn't go to anybody, everybody came to him. I mean, the other Rebbeim, the Pelzer Rebbe came, the Ger Rebbe came. They would come to the Rebbe to talk about Inyanim. Not to get a bracha. I mean, I would say the Rebbe would give them a bracha just like they wish the Rebbe well, right? But they would come to talk about it. Yeah. Every major Israeli politician came there. The Gulf War, Yitzhak Shamir was on the phone with the Rebbe every single day.
I know Begin came, I think, twice. No?
Begin came on his way to Camp David to get a bracha, and he told the Rebbe that it's very hard and there's tremendous pressure, punish lachatz, and he doesn't know whether he's going to be able to stand up with it. And the Rebbe told him, if you can't stand up with it, to it, so you should resign. You've done amazing things for the Jewish people, and you have tremendous schuyas with what you've done, and don't mess it all up by giving up at the end. And he did. We're in the Brook we're in now because of what he did in Camp David. That opened up the box. The Rebbe said very, very clearly, you're talking on autonomy, they hear state. So, it's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting in a travel office, travel agent. You used to use travel agents to get airline tickets, right? You go online and get your own ticket. There was no online. So you go to a travel agent to get a ticket. So as a travel agent, I used to arrange my tickets for my trips for Mayanot. He was a great guy, a French guy named Aaron. And so I'd be sitting in Aaron's office. It was owned by Lubavitcher, the Chish Tours. He used to arrange tickets for all the Bachrim for Tishrei. So it was in... Here's the doctor's office that a lot of you guys go, those big buildings above Gansaka, Wolfson, right? So in Wolfson there was a travel agent. Might still be. So that's where I used to go. And I was sitting in the travel agent waiting for what's in travel agent? Those magazines, those travel magazines. Right? So I picked one up, 10 days. 10 days, New York, Washington, Boston, 10 days, New York, Washington, Atlanta, whatever. New York's always one of them, but then somewhere else. So I'm leafing through it. Sunday, New York, Sunday, 12 o'clock, dollars, Etzel Rabbi Milubavitch. That was part of the tour. And that's just where everybody went. In those days, there was no such thing as getting into a cab where the cabbie wouldn't flip down his thing and show you the Rebbe dollar. And any cabbie who's 60 and up today, get in his cab and ask him if he has a Rebbe dollar. 10 to 1, he'll flip down his thing and he'll show you his Rebbe dollar. Everybody. I mean, that's why the Rebbe said he had to start doing dollars. This was Yechidus. You just couldn't see that many people, right? Thousands of people every Sunday. Everybody. Went to the Rebbe. So we were blessed with a a state of gilui that most generations don't have. So the Rebbe said that was the state of the Frierdiker Rebbe, but it was if you were to ask someone in the generation, it wouldn't have been as obvious. Anybody objective in our generation who doesn't have a bone to pick will say, well, yeah, it's pretty clear that the Rebbe was sort of the most important person walking around here. Right? Okay. So the Rebbe says that about the Frierdiker Rebbe. Say that. Okay, so let's go. Ches. Now the Rebbe is going to answer the questions about the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer, because we had all sorts of questions about the order of things in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer. So in Ches, the Rebbe is going to order that all. Okay, then we're going to get to a new issue. Okay, we've explained the order of the Maimer, but that we haven't explained the order of the Pasuk. Right, and we'll talk about that once we finish this little piece. Va'al pi zeh yesh levar kesher v'seder in yonim ba'maimer, b'bir ha'pasuk va'ata tetzave. Right? Shebetchilo, what's the first thing the Rebbe explains, the Frierdiker Rebbe? Mevar as a pedish de va'ata tetzave es b'nei Yisrael, that you connect the Jewish people to the Eibishter. And what does that mean? Shemeshu mekashem achaber es b'nei Yisrael. Again, the Rebbe puts Imor Ein Sof. The Frierdiker Rebbe didn't say Imor Ein Sof, he just said you connect the Jewish people, which we're going to see later can also apply to Avos Yisrael, connecting the Jewish people to each other. But the Rebbe has added Imor Ein Sof every time. Our Rebbe, right? That you connect the Jewish people with the Eibishter. Al Yedei, how? Al Yedei Shuzan and Farnes Es Emunah. That he nourishes their Emunah. That's the first thing the Rebbe talks about. Ula Achrei Zeh, and afterwards, Mevar. The Frierdiker Rebbe explains in his Maimer, Shegam Roya Yisrael Shebachol Dor, also the shepherds of the Jewish people in every generation, Ispashtus de Moshe is the expression of Moshe in that generation, Mechazki Mesamunah de Yisrael, strengthen the Amun of the Jewish people. Right? So not only is it Moshe, but it's Moshe in every generation. Ukamay Mordechai, like Mordechai, Moshe Shebedar, Shechizik Esamunasam, Sheyisrael Lamed Chazak, that he strengthened the Amun of the Jewish people to stand strong, b'limud Torah v'kiyum mitzvahs, learning Torah and performing mitzvahs. Instantly, Rebbe doesn't say Mesiras Nefesh yet, right? Just now, and we know that was karuch, but Mesiras Nefesh that was ultimately expressed through Mesiras Nefesh. But the Rebbe is talking about from cake. He kept them connected. And afterwards, the last thing the Rebbe explains. Mavara Pedish Bekosis Lamar explains the words in the pasuk Kosis Lamar Shebapasuk Veata tetzave Shemedaber that is clearly talking about L'chura b'Moshe. L'chura doesn't say clearly; it says L'chura b'Moshe Atzma. Veata tetzave is b'nei Yisrael. You connect the Jewish people to the Eibishter through revealing Etzem and Neshama, right? And, well, actually, we didn't say that. Through strengthening their Amunah and nourishing their Amunah, right? And then we get to, then later on, the Rebbe explains Kosis Lamar. And what's Kosis Lamar? That the crushedness of Golus brings about a revelation of Etzem and Neshama. Umavar HaPedish Bekosis Lamar, Shebapasik Vata Tetzave, Shemedaber L'chur b'Moshe Ma'atzma. That seems to be talking about Moshe. Moshe is the one who helps bring that about. Kizesh and Moshe Megala. That's what the Rebbe said earlier in the Maimer. Kizesh and Moshe Megala b'chinas Ma'or d'Yisrael. That which Moshe reveals the Ma'or d'Yisrael, the luminary of Yisrael, which is Etzem and Neshama. That's what it means that he connects the Jewish people to the Eibishter, and that's what it means that he's mefarnes the Emunah. And that's what it means that there's a Moshe in every generation that strengthens the Yidden's connection to the Eibishter. It's all the same. That's what the Rebbe is pointing out here. It's all the same idea. It's all just Gilui Etzem. Ki zeh shemoshe megala b'chinas amar de Yisrael Etzem and Neshama hu be'ikr. When is that expressed in the most obvious and powerful way? Al yedei spashtusa delay, the expression of him, not Moshe himself, but the expression of him. Shebazman golus, which is the state of kosis. She'eredu b'Yisrael, that it probably uredu, that it's aroused in Yisrael. Koyach hamesiras nefesh alehem, the power of mesiras nefesh that's in them. Shal yedei zeh hu ikar gilu etzem neshama. ma'or. And that's the essential expression of etzem and neshama. So there's Veata tetzave, raya mehemna, and kosis lama'or. Those are the three things in them, and they're all the same. They're all the same. They're all about etzem. They're all gilu etzem. Right? And that's what the Rebbe just explained. And that's the order of the Frierdiker Rebbe's mind. That's why they're in that order. Because ultimately they're not, it's not that they're separate ideas, it's all one idea, just different expressions of the same idea. Moshe is Mekasher Am Yisrael through Gilu Etzem. There's an etzem, there's a revelation of Moshe in every generation. What's he doing? He's Zan and Fana says Amuna. What does that mean? Well, we saw what that means. The Amuna itself. He's bringing about a revelation of etzem, that the Amuna should be mitzad etzem and neshama. And when is that expressed most powerfully? Kosis lamor. That's later in the pasuk. Okay, so everything's good. The mimer is straight. The order of things in the Frierdiker Rebbe's mimer makes sense to us. Good. We have one problem. The pasuk. We have to explain the pasuk now. Because in the pasuk, what does it say? Veata tetzave es b'nei Yisrael, v'yikhu elecha shemen zayas zach. They will bring to you shemen zayas zach. Right? Kosis lama'or, that is crushed to bring about a luminary. Right? La listener done. Okay. What's that clause, v'yikro elecha, doing in the middle between Veata tetzave and kosis lamar? The way we've explained things now, we've explained very well how Veata tetzave is kosis lamar. The most powerful expression of Veata tetzave is the kosis lamar. Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who connects the Jewish people to the Eibishter, which means he connects them to the etzem of their neshama. And the most powerful expression of that is in a time of kosis, a time of crushedness, which is golus. They'll reach ma'or. They'll express etzem and neshama, the luminary of the neshama, and therefore they will act in an oifen of mesiras nefesh. That's great. But those two things aren't connected in the pasuk. They're separated by a line that says v'yikoi lecha shemen zayazach. They'll bring to you. What's that? Right? If that, meaning this would be great. Veata tetzave es b'nei Yisrael, v'yalush v'yei shemen zayis kosis lamar lalois ner tamid, or something. I don't know, however you get to kosis lamar. But what's the v'yikoi lecha? Now we said v'yikoi lecha is they're bringing something to you. I understand that. It's not that we haven't explained a little bit of that part of the pasuk, but what's it doing in the pasuk? It seems to disconnect Veata tetzave from kosis lamar, but we're saying Veata tetzave and kosis lamar are one and the same thing. So what's v'yikoi lecha? That's what we have to explain now. So in other words, to put it simply, we've explained the mimer. Now we have to explain the pasuk. We didn't explain the pasuk yet.
Right, that was one of our initial
questions. Yeah, that was one of our initial questions, right? And we didn't ask the question this way because we didn't have this understanding of the mimer, right. And we didn't have this clear understanding of the connection of kosis lamar to Veata tetzave. But now that we have such a clear understanding, Veata tetzave and kosis lamar is mamish the same thing. So then what's v'yikoi lecha? What's that doing in the middle? It makes sense all peep shot in the pasuk. No problem with the pasuk as pshat, but in terms of the Chassidus now, so what's pshat in the pasuk?
So did we ever actually address in this mimer the aspect of why it was brought to Moshe and not to Aaron?
Yes.
To add to Moshe, right?
That we bring about an elevation in Moshe. We didn't explain how that works. But we said, yes, that we bring about an elevation of Moshe, and Am Yisrael are the legs, and Moshe is the rosh, and just like the legs can take the rosh to... That was on v'yikoi lecha, yeah.
But still, it seems a little...
Teisafes or. That was the language. An additional light in Moshe. Sorry, what do you want to say?
It seems a little bit off topic still, right? Like,
yeah, now it's like it's this thing in the middle of the pasuk that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what we're talking about. Right? Again, in the pasuk it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Right? In pshat, tell the Jewish people that they should bring to you shemen zayis, a certain type called kosis lamar, that will be the source of the candles in the menorah. Fine, that's perfect pshat. But now that we've explained the pnimis of the pasuk, so how do you explain that? Okay, so to say simply, the mimer's in order. The pasuk isn't. Okay, in order meaning it's fine. We understand everything that Frierdiker Rebbe said in the mimer. But tzarich lahavin. There's always something that you have to understand. You see that? We're never finished. The lefi bir hanal, based on what we've just explained. Ha'inyan de kosis. Now, of course, this is really beginning the Rebbe's Maimer. Right? I mean, everything up until now has been saying pshat in the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. Now, a lot of the Rebbe doing that, but it's with chedushim. But it's all saying pshat in the Friedrich Rebbe. Now, the whole rest of the Maimer is the Rebbe's Maimer, completely. But tzarich lahavin, the lefi bir hanal, based on what we've been saying up until now, ha'inyan de kosis lamar. This idea of kosis lamar, shayach, is very, very, very relevant. Veata tetzave b'nei Yisrael, that you should command the Jewish people, which means you should connect the Jewish people. Lezeh, shemesha, v'yispashtus d'dileisha b'chol dar, that Moshe and the expression of him in every generation, mekasher mecharbe es Yisrael imar ein sof. They connect the Jewish people with the Eibishter, and that will express itself in Mesiras Nefesh, Kosis Lamar. But the Rebbe says about Kosa, but in the Pasuk Ne'emar Kosis Lamar, Behem Shech Levi Yichoy Lech Hashem and Zayasach. Kosis Lamar is not a continuation of Veata tetzave. Kosis Lamar is a continuation of Yichoy Lech Hashem and Zayasach, which has nothing to do with Moshe per se. It might be talking about the effect that you and I can have on Moshe B'Seder, but it's not about Moshe himself. The inyan v'yicho elecho, she'yisrael mevin Shem and Moshe, that Am Yisrael brings Shem into Moshe, who she'yisrael meisifim teisofes or, that Am Yisrael brings about a greater or b'Moshe. Kamuv v'le'il sif beis, ba'maimers was brought earlier in the Maimer. So what's that got to do with? What's that doing here? Okay. Now, to explain that, the Rebbe asks an amazing question. Vehine. Now, this tests on that. This is mamish the Rebbe's Maimer, and this is where the Maimer takes a whole new path. Vehine. Hakosev v'kibul Yehudim esasher chalu lasis. The Rebbe points out something in the Megillah that is. It's absolutely obvious once it's pointed out, but in all fairness, I have never heard anybody say anything about it until this Maimer. Right? Now, I haven't learned everything, right? But I mean, this Maimer is the address where everybody goes, oh, wow, that's interesting. Never noticed that in the Megillah, right? Now, what is that? Now, it is interesting. It's based on a disagreement that we've already seen in the footnotes in the Maimer, and I'll just say this. Well, let's read the words first, and then I'll mention that. Not to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. In a Kosev v'kibul Yehudim esasher chalu lasos, that pasuk that says the Jews accepted that which they began to do, and we said that means the Kabbalah Torah at the time of Purim was greater than the Kabbalah Torah at Matan Torah. And what was the reason? Why was the Kabbalah Torah at the time of Purim so great? Short little answer. B'yadil. That's the answer. Short little answer. Mesiras Nefesh. Okay, it's a whole paragraph, but that paragraph is 2 words. Mesiras Nefesh. That was the answer. Right? Okay. Now, it's really interesting. When was that? So the Rebbe points out, the Masha Kosev B'Maimer, the Perish v'Kibul Yehudim, esasher chalu lasos, hu shebimei Achashverosh kiblu mashe chalu. I'm sorry, I missed the line. Midaber b'pashtus b'zman shela acharei hanes the Purim. Second line. This all happened after the miracle. Those psukim are after everything is fine.
It wasn't during that.
Wasn't during the time of the Gezerah. Right? That pasuk is not during the time of the Gezerah. The Kabbalah Torah might have been during the time of the Gezerah. But that pasuk is not during the time of the Gezerah. That pasuk is talking about the fact that now all the miracles have happened. We've won. We have the keys to Haman's house. Haman is hanging outside his house with his sons, right? We win. I mean, win like never won like that. Okay. So what's the Mesiras Nefesh? I get the Kabbalah Torah. It's amazing. Now, interestingly enough, we see Rashi in a footnote. And I don't expect you to remember the Rashi of the footnote because it was a footnote and it was one tiny little Rashi and it's two little words. And I don't expect you to remember it. But we did see Rashi in a footnote that said, what was the source of their Kabbalah Torah? Avas Hanes.
Inspiration.
The inspiration from the miracle. After, simple pshat. So what's the Mesiras Nefesh? There's no Mesiras Nefesh anymore. They're done. They're toast. There was Mesiras Nefesh 30 days ago that was pashut unbelievable for basically a whole year. Right?
But it doesn't talk about it in the pasuk.
Right? So wild. Like, everybody talks about the Mesiras Nefesh should put him in the wait a minute. This pasuk is when things are good. So look what the Rebbe says about it. It's really unbelievable. We're going to see most of it tomorrow, but we'll see some of it today. V'yesh Leimar. Now, those words are always really, really interesting in a Rebbe's mimer when there's no footnote next to them. Yesh Lemar, and you're not going to find this anywhere. You could say like this.
It's totally original.
Yeah, no one ever said that. He's the Rebbe. Any time the Rebbe quotes something that the Tzemach Tzedek said, or the Rebbe Rashab said, or the Mitler said, it'll always be quoted below. There's always a footnote in a Mugadik mimer. In a non-Mugadik mimer, so there aren't footnotes to say to, but in a Mugadik mimer, I mean, you see how many footnotes are and how important the footnotes are. That footnote we made a big deal about yesterday, and also see Tanya. And then all the Mishpiyim spend a great deal of time. Why does I have to say also see Tanya? Oh, because the discussion in Tanya is different than the discussion in all those Maimarim, but it's still there. Right? Yesh Leimar. Sometimes the Rebbe say, Ulai Yesh Leimar. Then it's really going to be an atomic bomb, because even the Rebbe says Ulai. But this one is Yesh Leimar. The Masha Kasuba Maimer, the Bepedish, the Kibla Yehudi, Mesasher Chalulas. Let's just see the basic place where we're going to go. And then we'll explain it. We'll see it explained by the Rebbe to us tomorrow. The Masha Kasuba Maimer, that which it says in the Maimer, the Pedish, the Kibla Yehudi, Mesasher Chalulas, says that the Jews accepted that which they began to do at Matan Torah. Who that means should be Mei Achashverosh Kiblu Mashe Chalu Matan Torah. They accepted that which they had only begun to accept at Matan Torah. Who gam lefi pashtus hakosuf. This is also in accordance with the simple pshat in the pasuk. Shevakiblu, that this whole idea haya la'achre hanes, after the miracle. Because after all, you could say that pasuk is not telling me about what's happening now. It's telling me what happened in the last year, right? It's not the Kiblu Yehudi. Now, simple pshat in the pasuk is talking about the state of the Jews in this incredible euphoria after the victory. Kiblu Yehudi Mashiach Halalasas. Okay, that's clearly simple pshat in the pasuk. What does pshat mean? Context. Well, that's the context of the pasuk after the nes. Okay, but you could explain it, and that's what the Rebbe says. It is possible to explain it. It's saying this is what happened back there, right? That there's no problem with that, right? But the Rebbe is going to say a much deeper and more amazing pshat. Val pizeh. And let's just see this and then we'll stop. See where we're going tomorrow. Val pizeh. And that idea that in the days of Achashverosh, Kiblu Mashe Chalu b'Matan Torah, that they accepted that which began in Matan Torah, Shnei Inyanim. There's two aspects to that. Two more lines. There's a period and two more lines down. HaKabbalah shahaisa bizmana gezeda. The Kabbalah that was at the time of the gezeda, al yedeya mesiras nefesh shalem. There was a function of tremendous mesiras nefesh. Kimafurish b'maimer. That's what the Friedrich Rebbe talks about in the Maimer. It's the Friedrich Rebbe's idea, this mesiras nefesh, right? VaKabbalah shahaisa la'achre enes depurim, like Rashi, and the Kabbalah that was after the miracle. Mi'avas enes, the lashon of Rashi. Shehi, obviously, it has to be Nailis Yeser, which is a higher level. It has to be a higher level. Otherwise, if it's a lower level of Kabbalah, so then why do I need that? What's the advantage of that? So they already accepted it on the higher level. Why do I need a new acceptance on a lower level? So obviously it's a higher, more powerful acceptance, the second one, adding to the first. She Nailis Yeser gam ya Kabbalah bezman hagezeda. Even greater than the Kabbalah at the time of the Gezerah, could the Lekaman. As will be explained later, v'yesh lemar, and you could say as follows, and we'll see what the Rebbe has to say about this tomorrow. And this is like one of the atomic bombs in the Mimer right now. Okay, so we'll see that tomorrow.